Kelly Alexander Show is proud to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of Janet Jackson's Janet Period album and tour by speaking to the people who were involved in its success. We are so happy to welcome back to the show Grammy Award-winning super producer Jimmy Jam, who has worked with everyone, including Usher, Michael Jackson, Mary J. Blige, George Michael, and of course, Janet Jackson. Jimmy, thank you so much for spending time with us on the Kelly Alexander Show.
Thank you for having me, Kelly.
So the Janet Period album, celebrating 25 years this year, I wanted to know, how does that actually feel when I say those words out loud to you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, first of all, it feels like a blessing to be able to be around for something that is a 25-year anniversary. I mean, that's, first of all, amazing. Second of all, the fact that it's relevant enough that someone wants to celebrate it and talk about it, feels really good, because we always set out to make music that was timeless, I guess you could say, and we have no idea when we're doing it if that's going to be the case, but it's been very fortunate for us in this case that the music has endured, and so happy to celebrate it. Happy that we're here to do that.
Did you and Terry already know that for her next project, especially coming off of the success of both Rhythm Nation and Control, that you would be back working with her on the Janet Period album?
Yeah, there was I think we talked about it before with Rhythm Nation, that there was a period between Control and Rhythm Nation where we weren't sure whether we were going to be doing Rhythm Nation after Control, just because of, a lot of politics and people getting involved. Nothing that had to do with us and Janet. It was more the outside forces. And when Rhythm Nation, the tour and everything happened, the album was successful, the tour was obviously very successful. We never lost contact with each other, so I think it was a little different situation. She was trying to decide, where she was even going to sign, because she was at A&M Records, but had a bunch of, her contract was up. So she had a lot of offers on the table from a whole lot of different labels. We were in touch with each other the whole time. We never lost touch with each other. So I think we always felt like, whatever that next project was going to be, that we were going to be involved in it. And it didn't really matter what label it was for. I mean, that was her decision.
And speaking of that bidding war that went on, because that's still sort of legendary to this day about, the fact that she ended up with Virgin in the grand scheme of things. Once that decision was made and she signed with Virgin, and then, the project could start, did you guys feel an added pressure to perform because she had this new contract, and maybe she herself was like going, oh, I need to deliver, even though she'd already delivered, obviously, on 2 previous albums before that?
Interestingly, no. We didn't have that at all. We were excited to get started because we were all in a really good place in our lives. I mean, we were all in really good relationships at that point. We were excited creatively to move on to the next step because, Rhythm Nation was wonderful, but remember, this was a 3-year period after Rhythm Nation that we started this project. So there were a lot of ideas and a lot of we couldn't wait to get back to the studio and start working. And once the deal was done, I mean, we never thought about it. Like when we were in the studio, we didn't write a song any differently because, there was a $40 million deal or whatever the heck it was. Matter of fact, one of the analogies I always used, I remember in talking about it back when it happened, was I said it's like when you pay a baseball player. I mean, you get a huge baseball contract. When you're standing up at the plate and somebody's throwing a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, all you're thinking is, I want to hit this thing, not, oh, man, I just signed this contract for a lot of money. I better hit it. It's like, no, I'm concentrating on not getting hit with the pitch, and I'm going to try to knock it out the park because that is what I do. So it's just another way of saying that in the studio, that's our domain. It's like the last thing we're thinking about is, how much we're getting paid or pressure of expectations. I mean, that is kind of outside the studio maybe, but not in the studio.
Can you talk to us about the timeline, Jimmy, with regards to starting the project and sort of where she was with finishing off Poetic Justice? Because I'm not sure if she started recording while she was still finishing off the movie or how that came down. But obviously I know, and she even said it herself, I believe, in the Rolling Stone interview that, Poetic Justice really influenced, I think, her self-confidence and sort of coming out of her shell in certain ways. So how did that sort of play out?
Poetic Justice happened before we even started the record. Janet had always had a desire has always enjoyed doing film. That was a wonderful opportunity for her to work with John Singleton, to work with Tupac on a film. It was, it was like a calling for her. Maya Angelou's poetic words, it was just the right thing that needed to happen. And it certainly made the process of doing this record. The Janet record would have been a different album without her Poetic Justice experience. Because to me, if you're someone who writes and you write from the heart, you're writing about your experiences and you're writing about where you're at in your life at any given moment. And Janet has always done that. So the idea that doing this movie really opened her up, I think made her feel very confident because, acting is a different challenge, but one that she pulled off. But then I think she was really excited. I mean, you come into it and you talk about the pressure of having a big deal and all of these different distractions. She was very focused because she had, worked on a movie without really working on music for a while. So I think when we got in the studio, we were excited. And I will say also that, not that it really came into it a lot, but I think we were excited about the fact that it was a new record company because it was just a chance to, make them happy. I think we did feel like, while this is really cool, we want to really deliver for, the folks that have signed her and have put their confidence and trust in us to come through with a great record. So I think all of that was probably in play a little bit. Like I said, when we actually went in the studio, we weren't thinking about that, but certainly as we started, I think there were all those, different emotions at play.
Did you guys figure out fairly quickly that the album was going to be very much in the love overtones? Like, every sort of aspect of the album has different versions of love stories and all that. Obviously, I know there were still socially conscious songs like New Agenda, but did you guys sort of figure out very quickly it was going to be like, for lack of a better word, her love album?
We did. And I think that there's always multiple kind of inspirations. Now, one of the inspirations for us, we thought of Janet as our Let's Get It On album, just as Marvin followed up, what's going on with Let's Get It On. So I think that parallel was definitely on our minds, but also, like I say, just where we were all at in our lives. I mean, she was, kind of a secret relationship at that point, but, Renee was a big part of her life at that point, and she was very happy. I was engaged. I wasn't married yet, but I was engaged while the record was going on. And Terry was happily married at that point, too, if I remember correctly. So we were all kind of in a blissful place in our personal lives. And I think that came across on, what ultimately became the Janet album.
And can you, I'm not sure, I know I'm asking you to go back into the archives here, but you always have a great memory anyway, so I'm sure you're going to remember this. What was the first song you actually wrote and recorded?
So that's an interesting question. And I've been trying to figure that out. And for a lot of the albums, I'm able to figure it out right away. I was listening to the Janet album today specifically for that reason. I haven't really been able to come up with it. I know that we did again really early on in the process because coming off of the film and wanting to write something related for the film, I know that was one of the first things that we did. I just can't remember whether it was the first thing. I also know that If was among the first songs recorded, and I know that because the two guys who were kind of the A&R folks at Virgin Records, who were Jordan Harris and Jeff Ayeroff, they had come through Minneapolis just to kind of say hi and I think to kind of check up on us and make sure we were actually working. And the song that they heard, because Janet said, just play them whatever you're working on. I don't even think she was at the studio. I don't even think she was at the studio at that point in time. She just said, whatever you're working on, just play it. So I remember playing the track. I don't even know whether we might have done like just a dummy vocal at that point in time. But they heard the music for If, and they walked out and they were like, okay, great. That sounds great. And that was the only record that they ever heard, which makes me believe that we probably didn't have really anything else to play at that point. I mean, maybe we did, but for sure that was the one they heard and fell in love with and felt like, oh, okay, we're in good shape. So I know those two were amongst the first ones. I'm just not sure necessarily in which order that was done.
Well, I'm glad you brought both of them up because I had sort of specific questions about both of them, and I'll start with If because you just finished with that. So I wanted to know how it feels to know that, and this is my opinion, but I think it's probably shared by a lot of people, that song, well, obviously became legendary in its own right, but then the instrumentation mixed with the choreography just took that song to like another level. Like everybody knows If and the choreography, especially for the breakdown. How does that feel knowing that those two, sort of the instrumentation and the choreography, just took this thing to another place?
Well, it feels great. I mean, the one really fun thing about, working with any artist is to watch them bring the song to life, because we, write the song and do our contribution, but then it's really the artist that brings it to life. But I don't think any artist brings a song to life like Janet does. And it's not only through her vocal performance, but then it's about her visual, whether it's the music videos, whether it's the concert staging. It always made the songs bigger than life. And I remember when we did If, it was interesting because it was kind of the song that probably sounded the most like the Rhythm Nation album. I mean, it was very kind of hard and edgy, as opposed to the kind of softness of the rest of the record. But we thought that it was a bridge from one album to the next. I remember, for me, Janet was always like Diana Ross to me, like as far as an ability to sing melodies that everybody wanted to sing along with. So whenever I think of Diana Ross, I always thought of Motown, and that's the reason that we always like putting Motown samples into the songs, because I always thought that there was such a parallel. But also, when you write with Janet, you can basically throw anything at her, and she's really willing to try it. And if you listen to the melody of the song, which is this really low voice, I always called it a kind of a Native American chant type rhythm. Mm-hmm. She would say, well, what do you hear for the verse? And I said, like a hey and a hand and a hey and a hand. And I said something that sounds like that. Now, I wouldn't expect for someone to figure out how to do that and actually to put words to it. But with Janet, we had gotten to the point after 2 albums where we knew whatever we threw at her, she could figure it out. And she came the next day with lyrics that were absolutely amazing. And, it was everything that we thought, but better. So then, of course, taking it to the next level, the choreography and the great folks that, she had doing that. And then the video was absolutely incredible. And what it reminds me of is there's a whole story. We can talk about it now or we can talk about it later on, but there's a whole story about that there was a battle whether If should have been the first single or not, that dates back to Jordan and Jeff coming to town and actually hearing that as the track, and that being the track stuck in their mind. Anyway, it was amazing to see visually what she did, but at that point, nothing really surprised us with the way she would bring the songs to life.
Joining us on the Kelly Alexander Show, Grammy Award-winning producer Jimmy Jam. Make sure to follow him on Instagram and Twitter at Flight Time Jam. Again, as we talked about before, is a fantastic song. It's, I think, one of her most enduring ballads. It's also, nominated for an Oscar, an Academy Award. She performed it on the Oscars that year, which was amazing. I guess, with that song, it's almost like it's next level, but it's I think almost just phenomenal in its simplicity, if I can say that. So I'm not sure where, again, sits in your life.
Well, I like the term phenomenal in its simplicity, because that was one where we knew we wanted to have something, inspired by the movie and by the character and that. But we also needed it to be a Janet song. So it wasn't necessarily singing in the character of of Justice in the movie. But it was something that needed to be, have a message of longing, I guess you would say, and that. So, it was interesting because we had just gotten a new piano at that point. And it was really the first song that we had used this acoustic piano on. And back in the day, there was, I don't know whether people are familiar with MIDI recording, but it's basically from the old days, MIDI recording was always where you could have different keyboards talk to each other. So, just by connecting them together. And this acoustic piano actually had a MIDI, which most acoustic pianos don't come with, but this one had it. So I could play the acoustic piano and then have a sound on a synthesizer that would play concurrently with what I was playing on the piano. And that was the first song that we actually used that piano and that technology to do. And what it did is it just enhanced the song, the way the song sounded, the way the piano sounds. we still have that piano. When people come to the studio and I hit the first chord of Again, you just automatically recognize not only the chord, but the sound of the piano that we were able to achieve. So it's a pretty special song. And you mentioned the Academy Awards. That was probably one of the most nervous I've ever been in my life, was playing out that, because it is a piano ballad, which means everything is dependent on playing the piano part correctly.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is going to be so crazy. But the cool thing about it was the string arrangement on the song, which was done by a guy named Lee Blasky up in Minneapolis. He had sent all the sheet music. So we had this huge orchestra. I remember Bill Conti, I believe, was the musical director of the orchestra, or the conductor for the orchestra. And the minute I hit my first chord, this orchestra just comes sweeping in. And at that point, it didn't matter if I played chopsticks, because the orchestra basically took the song over. But man, what a memorable night that was. We didn't win, and we were mad about it. And I'm still mad about it to this day, quite honestly, because I just think that was such a beautiful song. But the opportunity to be on the Academy Awards was absolutely amazing, and to perform was crazy. So, and the other thing I like about that song is when you go see Janet in concert and she performs the song, and she basically doesn't need to sing the song because the audience sings every note. Mm-hmm. As a songwriter, there's nothing really more pleasing that people know every word and they sing it at the top of their lungs. And that's an amazing feeling.
The Academy Awards, I did want to ask you, because, obviously Janet by this point was already a consummate performer, so I'm sure she already had nerves of steel. But I did want to know, was she nervous for that performance because it wasn't her bouncing around the stage doing, backflips like she normally does? Like, this was her and you guys and a vocal and a huge audience with like A-level stars. So was she nervous for that or not?
I don't remember her really being nervous about it. I think I was more nervous because now she had been performing the show. She was in the middle of the Janet tour when the Academy Awards happened. So she had been singing that song every single night for probably, 30 shows. I hadn't been playing it every night. Okay. So I had to relearn the song myself to remember all the various parts in that. So I think I was much more nervous than she was. If she was nervous about it, we didn't really talk about it, and she didn't really. It was more me. I was nervous because I didn't want to let her down.
Right. Okay. Well, you guys did a phenomenal job, that's for sure. And speaking of down-tempo tracks, I have to bring this up because Anytime, Any Place, did, first of all, it's a fan favorite. It did amazingly well on the Billboard R&B charts at the time. And I wanted to know if it's a true Janet classic track in your opinion, because it just seems like that epitomizes Janet in a way, like that song.
I would definitely say so. I think Anytime, Any Place is one of the best records we've done together, easily. And I think that it's no accident that it's had like second and third lives through Kendrick Lamar, redoing it and that. And I've heard the sample used on a whole lot of records now. And there's something about it that's just very special. Mm-hmm. The other thing I would say was I was reading the other day where I think it was Forbes or somebody was saying that albums are dead and artists shouldn't make albums anymore. And if you listen to the Janet album, I think, and you listen to the sequence of the songs, I think that the way the songs lead up to, particularly Body That Loves You, which is the song that comes before, if I'm not mistaken, Anytime, Any Place, the idea of those songs all coming together, as great as I think Anytime, Any Place turned out, I think that listening to it as kind of the songs all together, there's something about it that makes it more special, hearing it like that, as part of a group of songs. But, I think Anytime, Any Place would definitely be a classic, no question. She absolutely killed the song. And it's one of those songs I could listen to at any point in time. If that record came on, I probably would listen to the whole record. It's like one of those where you just don't want to cut it off. And the other thing we were able to do back then, that we're more aware. I mean, listen, time moves really quick for folks now, and it is a much more of a, what I call a microwave society where everybody wants everything now. But the way that song works is the way that, to me, the song almost unfolds. You know what I'm saying? It's almost unfolds in layers. And it's very leisurely, and it's very It's not hurried. It's not rushed, And that to me is, what love should be or lovemaking should be. That to me is what it is. And then once again, we talk about her visuals. The visuals for that song were once again absolutely amazing. And it was Janet's call, I will say also, that was the single, because there was a lot of, it came out in the summer and there was a lot of kind of pushback from the label about, releasing a ballad in the summer and whatever. And there was a big meeting about it, I remember. And she showed up to the meeting and everybody had all these statistics and all these different things. And she thanked everybody. She said, I thank everybody for putting in such hard work and putting these numbers together. Anytime, any place is the single. And she walked out the room. And so it was great. It was the ultimate boss move, right? Oh. And it was perfect because we all felt that way too. And she had a really good sense of what she wanted. And of course, she, as you say, the results on the chart and the success of the song, she was absolutely vindicated. She was absolutely right in making that call. And so it's just interesting, all of the things that when you think about it, and particularly when you look back as we're doing now, there's so many things that have to go right and so many little moments of, that nobody even thinks about. It's like everybody, of course, when the song's a hit, you go, well, of course it's the single, but they don't know all the fighting and arguing and backstory that why that almost wasn't a single. Like we almost got talked out of it. And it was the same thing with the first single, That's the Way Love Goes. We almost got talked out of that for the first single. So you never know. But when it all happens right at the end of it and you look back on it, it all seems like, oh, man, that all went really, really well.
Speaking of Anytime, Any Place, I think that song should be a case study for any artist who thinks they should do R&B. Like, I think they should study it and learn it and understand it and then figure out themselves, because it's timeless and it's amazing. And, another song that I mean, obviously that was a single and That's the Way Love Goes is a single, and If, and all the ones that were chosen as singles were, phenomenal. I did want to ask you about a couple of the other ones that didn't make it as singles, but again, that I just think are next level. And one of them would be Because of Love. Like, I know it's sort of that one was a single, but I don't think it got around the world as much as maybe it could have. And how do you feel about it? Because it was so it was just, again, such a crazy melody that you just got sucked in immediately. And then the cutesy video that went along with it.
Yeah, Because of Love was, I think, once again, when you look at the release pattern of the singles, because we had just done Again as the single before, we thought Because of Love was a great way to bring the tempo back up. Mm-hmm. And also that feel of that song was very much a New Jack Swing feel, which, probably gets lost to a lot of people because of its, it's a very happy song or a cutesy song or whatever you want to say. Mm-hmm. But that is part of Janet. And it's interesting, once again, as a songwriter, that you can go through all these various moods and various sonics of different sounds and different tempos and that. But at the end of the day, it's all her. It's all just different facets of Janet. And she has that cute, smiley, giggly side to her. And that song was that side of her. And it was a great way to bring the tempo up. The video was very much kind of a behind the scenes, with her and the kids just having fun. So it was cool. I mean, it was, it wasn't, I don't think it's probably one of the songs that people would say is a classic, but we think it did what we wanted it to do, which was just kind of bring the tempo back and give something that's up-tempo and danceable and put a smile on your face.
Talk to us about Funky Big Band, because I know I still remember exactly where I was the first time I got to sit through the Janet album. And I remember when that came on, it was not expected. Not that I knew what was to be expected, I guess, as a 17-year-old, but I just I was like, wow, this is different, this is cool, and this is throwback all at the same time.
So Funky Big Band really happened because, when we talk about the different facets of Janet, growing up, she was a really big fan of musicals, and she was a really big fan of old, black and white cartoons and kind of the, that kind of throwback era of recording of those old songs, of the big band sounds and all of that. I mean, all of that is kind of part of her musical language that she grew up with loving. So really it started off of a sample that I had from I'd got a keyboard, and I can't remember I think it was called an XP60. And it was just a sample that was in the XP60 that I thought was kind of cool. And I played it for her, and she said, oh my God, she says, yeah, this reminds me of those old cartoons, with the people dancing and the whole thing. And I thought, okay, well, let's work it up. So the whole idea of Funky Big Band was just kind of, the working title was kind of like, it sounds like a funky big band is what it sounds like. So she weaved this whole, lyric around that. And I got to tell you, one of the things about that song is that I wish there would have been a visual to that song. I mean, there wasn't, because it was never a single. But you can imagine that kind of juke joint, idea of just a funky club with that sound and that. It's funny. I think it'll still happen at some point because it just lends itself to that to me. But it would have been great to see visuals to that song. But that was a lot of fun to do, and also just she was always very cool about letting. Well, in this case, I was going to say the band stretch out, because at the end of it, it's just basically kind of a bunch of sax solo and a trombone solo and all of those kinds of things, like just kind of letting almost like a jam session happen. But, in the case of that song, I think I did all the instruments on it. So it was kind of just me playing around. Like I would just leave the tape rolling and just kind of do stuff like that. And thinking that, we're going to fade it out early and, the song doesn't need to be 7 minutes long or whatever. And she would always go, no. Just let it. And I'd say, well, should we write some words here or something? She said, no. You just play. And I'm just going to listen and that's fine, So she, gave me the chance to kind of stretch out and do some kind of fun things and imagine, being a trombone player or being a trumpet player or being a guitar player or whatever. It allowed me to just kind of be a band, which was always a lot of fun.
Now, you and I have talked about Throb before, sort of in comparisons of other songs that she's done, but obviously for the 25th anniversary, you and I both know how important Throb is to Janet fandom. We all love it. It's, we're so happy when she performs out on every tour. I actually had a question from a fan that said, if you ever do something for, the 25th anniversary, please ask Jimmy about Throb and where the inspiration came from and just how it came together, especially because I'm sure, as you know, the Go On Miss Janet, like Go On Girl, just that's like a thing now. That's been a thing and people love it and still love it. And so tell us about Throb.
Throb was really, we wanted to have a really clubby dance record. It was a series of a bunch of different vocal samples, first of all. The Go On Girl is actually me.
Yep.
It wasn't me saying it like for the record. It was probably some banter back and forth that we had, just like I might have said it to her before a take of a song or something. But we just kind of thought it sounded cool, so we used that. And then we used the here we go now. That was not Shawnette. That was Josie.
Okay.
That was Josie. So Josie would always say stuff like that, and she'd go, "Get busy," or she would say something, and I was like, that's what we need. We need you to just go in and just say some stuff. So she went in and said stuff, and we would pick little lines and stuff. And then we would take little sections of, different sounds and stuff and sample them and then put them into the song. So it was just kind of a collage of different sounds. And once again, we just wanted it to feel like a really great club record. Now, it helped that as we were working on that song, not only was Josie in town, but I want to say Shawnette was probably in town. There was a few of the dancers that were in town, and that helped too, because as you're crafting a track and all of a sudden you have, the dancers actually there. And so what you're putting together. They're either vibing to it or they're not, And it was like you would put a certain part on, like when we came up with the little breakdown, and then little breakdown and stuff, and they'd all go crazy. They'd go, oh, I love that breakdown and that kind of thing. So it was very informed by her dancers, and Throb was her idea to call it Throb. I think that's me saying Throb. I think that's me also. So
I think so too.
My little vocal contribution to that. But it's amazing, and I loved when she did it. Once again, you can't talk about the sonics of Janet without talking the visuals of Janet, and when she did Saturday Night Live and absolutely killed it. And then it became a showcase on tour for her dancers. All that stuff is just awesome to watch.
Did you know, Jimmy, that one, specifically Throb I'm talking about, was going to be something that would last? Because again, in a way, like some people could view it as like, oh, it's just, we're filling a hole that we need to fill. But no, like this thing has legs. It's lasted for 25 years.
Right. Well, I mean, I think if you do music that really, you're really trying to, we never felt we were filling a hole. I think we always felt like whenever we were creating was a different side of Janet. And Janet is such a complex woman, as a lot of people are. I mean, there's different sides. There's the club side that likes to go and hang with her friends in the club. There's the giddy, giggly side, which is, we talked about earlier, but even a song like Whoops Now, which is about, going out with all your friends and having fun. There's the sensual side, the body that loves you, which is much more romantic. There's the anytime, any place, which is much more just sexual, if you will. You have all of those different elements. And I think the reason that Janet is so interesting is that she gets to bring all of those elements out on her album. And it's the reason that, when you talk about, well, people should just do singles instead of albums, it's like that would be a travesty for Janet to do that, because she has way too many sides and they're all relevant and they're all relatable to people. And to me, you can't take that away. I mean, now, listen, people could take any track off the Janet album and just as their track that they like and whatever. That's absolutely fine. They can do that. But in the scope of who Janet is as a total person, you have to listen to the total album.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And with regards to the features on the album, because Chuck D was on there, of course, and Kathleen Battle, and I know on a version of You Want This, MC Light. So talk to us about the features. Were they sort of planned out in advance, or was it sort of organically like, oh, Chuck would sound great on this song?
Yeah, when we decided to do New Agenda, she wanted to work with Chuck. And so what we did was create a track that sounded very, Public Enemy, for lack of a better term. I mean, we wanted to have a backdrop that fit his voice. And so that song started off as a sample, which was a Stevie Wonder song, which is the very first thing you hear. And then from that, we went into this kind of bombastic hip-hop track with all kinds of samples. And that was the thing about the production on Public Enemy that the Bomb Squad and Hank Shockley and those guys did, was it was always samples that they weren't in the right key. They were, when I think music, it's like, well, something's supposed to be in a certain key and then you put the vocals with it. But in rap music, because there's not necessarily a key to it, it didn't matter. So they would take vocal samples where one thing would be in the key of E, one thing would be in the key of B, one thing would be in the key of F. And this kind of dissonant sound was what made it so powerful. So that was the idea with New Agenda, was to have something that just sounded like the kind of musicality of the Stevie Wonder sample for her to sing over, then mixed with, if you listen to the part where Chuck D comes in, a very kind of loud, chaotic hip-hop track, behind it. And I remember Shockley came to town. So it was kind of like, let's make sure that the guy that actually created a lot of this stuff is actually around, when we're doing it. So. And
with regards to the sequencing of the album, speaking of New Agenda, I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because in a way, again, this is my opinion, New Agenda really was its own island in a way, based off of everything else you guys did on the album, I would say. So how did you guys figure out where it was going to go?
Well, we thought it made sense. And remember, when you're making albums at this point, there still is kind of the idea of a side one and side two. Mm-hmm. Although things had moved into CD at that point. But we always thought that it was kind of the second part of the album, that after Funky Big Band went out, then the next thing would be, New Agenda. So it would be a cassette flip or an album flip, but on a CD, it's kind of the bridge. It's kind of the middle of the record, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm. And with regards to samples, I wanted to ask you about that. I know you and I have chatted before about the importance of samples in the music that you produce, and you make them have this whole new life. And I know one of the samples that I think sticks out for absolutely everybody is on You Want This with Love Child. So how did that come about? Because you guys flipped it so amazingly to make it work for You Want This.
Well, I mean, I always start off by saying what a huge fan of Motown I was growing up. And obviously, Janet's brothers, the Jackson 5, had a lot to do with that. But for me growing up, it was all about Diana Ross and the Supremes and those great songs. And so any chance to reference that in creating new music, I always felt Janet was the perfect artist to do that for. Love Child was just one of my all-time favorite records, and I just thought it was a great way to start the record because it was so catchy. I just remember the first time hearing that song, and before I even knew it was Diana Ross and the Supremes, just hearing that intro to that song, jing, 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 bam, I just thought, wow, how cool is that? So that was the whole idea, was just to kind of do something with that. But then there's also Kool and the Gang mixed in there, Jungle Boogie's in there with the horn part. I'm a huge Kool and the Gang fan. I mean, I met Terry Lewis over Kool and the Gang because Terry knew every Kool and the Gang bass part. So, it's just kind of I mean, a lot of the choices were just songs that really informed my youth and my growing up loving music, and a chance to acknowledge my love and passion for those songs. And luckily Janet had the same passions and the same songs. And one of the things we would always do before we would even start an album is we would just play music back and forth to each other. And a lot of these songs I played for her, like in the middle of If, where it goes, doom, doom, that Someday We'll Be Together, which is, obviously a Motown classic. So, but we played all of those songs kind of back and forth. And I said, I'd love to use a piece of this. And she'd go, okay, Jimmy, just say whatever you want to do. That's great. And so that was kind of the idea, was You Want This. And always wanted You Want This to have that. I love Janet attitude. In the past we talked about Control and how the first two albums with her, because she was just kind of given songs to sing, that to me, there was none of that attitude that I saw like from the Brothers Variety Show or from the Carol Burnett Show. And, when she'd have her hand on her hip and just be this feisty little girl, it was like, where's that attitude at? We need that attitude. So we always tried to make sure that came across, and You Want This just seemed like a very bold statement for someone to say, but we knew she could pull it off. And then on the remix, when MC Light came in, Janet and MC Light were just really good friends. We loved MC Light. She was amazing, and she just came in and killed it. And I think I want to say we had worked with her on the Mo Money soundtrack at that point. I believe we had already worked with her. So we were already familiar with working with her, and she came in and absolutely, killed it. So it was just a natural thing. I mean, it wasn't a lot of pre-planned, but we did know that the people we wanted to collaborate with were not necessarily people that you would think of. Like, you wouldn't necessarily think of Chuck D, you wouldn't necessarily think of MC Light, and you wouldn't necessarily think about Kathleen Battle.
Yeah.
But that Janet came in with that. I mean, she just said, I want to do something with Kathleen Battle. And it's like, okay, well, then we got to write a song that really can showcase what it is that she does. And those are just the challenges, but that's what we're supposed to do. If we're doing our jobs as producers, then that's our, the idea is to figure all that out.
I know that you, and we've again talked about this in the past, that, you help Janet, I think, to whatever degree she needs you to help translate what you guys have recorded in the studio to get that on stage. So with regards to the Janet album, how did that play out? How did you and Terry help her, lift what you've done in Minneapolis to taking it around the world? You mean
stage-wise or just...
Well, just, I guess I'm sure you helped with, how maybe the songs would go. I know the band was there and Rex Salas was the music director, but I'm just wondering, like, what opinions you had or if you thought certain songs should go certain ways and the medleys and how that would work.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, I mean, listen, we would be involved because a lot of times when the concepts for the songs were coming together, we'd always think about, what live performances would be. We would always think about, the order that we thought the songs should be kind of as they were being crafted. I mean, all of those kind of ideas were just kind of all the way there. And we would certainly help with pre-production on the tour. But Janet always had really good bands and really good band directors and stuff. So the ability to take what she did on the record and then make it live where it worked was always pretty simply done, I guess I would say. We were probably a lot more involved with that. I would say Velvet Rope, All For You,
okay,
at that point. But the Janet record, we were kind of involved, but in some of putting that together. But she had it. I mean, she knew what she was doing. She had a very clear vision of what it was, and she would call us if there was something she couldn't figure out. But no, she's very good about that. And once again, her team of people, from her choreographers to her band, everybody was not only really good at what they did, but also Janet was really good at getting the best and the most out of them. Like she was such an inspirational person that everybody wanted to do their best. And that to me has been a common theme, right through to the State of the World tour. Her crew and everybody just wants to go the extra mile for her because she just inspires that. So I think that happens across the board with her.
And I wanted to ask you just about some visuals really quickly with the Rolling Stone cover, obviously, which I know was the full version of what the album cover ended up being. What did you think of that? Obviously, the Rolling Stone cover has become iconic. There's been spoofs taken off of that and the whole thing. And did you know it was going to blow up like it did and become this iconic?
I thought it was one of the most stunning pictures I'd ever seen in my life. She showed me after the session was over, and I just was like, I was blown away by it. And we actually talked about that the album, because once again, we're still at that point dealing still with vinyl at that point, that it would be cool to just see the face or the cover, but then you would then learn later on that there was an actual full-length shot. So it was very well planned, I thought, the way she did it. Because she said, I remember when she showed me the picture, she said, what do you think about this for an album cover? And I said, whoa. I said, well, I said, I'll buy that album. I said, I don't even need to hear it. I said, I like that, but she said, no, that cover is just going to be my head. And I said, oh, okay, I like that. And I remember us talking a lot about the fact that it was just going to be Janet, that there was no need to be Janet Jackson at that point. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about separating herself from her family, but it was about empowering herself as an individual. And we all thought that was an amazing idea to just call the record Janet. And we felt like at that point of her career, that was really all you needed to know. If you said Janet, you knew you were talking about Janet Jackson.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you actually brought up too about the naming of the album, that it was going to be Janet period, because I wanted to get your opinion on that, because obviously for years it's been floated around that she had to deal with for so many years that she's just the younger sibling, and it took her, like you said, a couple of those albums to I think for people to get over it. And was she frustrated at all by it, or was she just took it in stride? Because obviously I know she's very proud of Michael, very proud of her brothers and being from the family, but I can only imagine what it must be like always being like, oh, you're Michael's little sister. So was this like really her way to stamp it and be like, I can do my thing, I've already shown you I can, but here I go again?
I think it was that. I don't know how much frustration there was. I know there was a lot there. Initially, I think there was frustration, and I'm actually probably more towards, not towards us, but because there was this thought of that, somehow we were like the talent and she was just like lucky or something. And it was like, no, that's not the way it is. And it's like, it's that, we work together really well. She has a lot of great ideas. We help her get the ideas, put the ideas together. We're doing our job. That's what we're supposed to do. But there's a magic about the way we work together, and there's things we see in her that we're able to bring out. And we were able to bring out confidence in her. We were able to artistically tell her that her involvement in the record was going to be the record. It wasn't, as I said on the first two albums, where people just gave her songs to sing. It was like, no. What are your ideas? And then we create the songs, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to talk about nasty whatever, great, then let's do that. Like you want to talk about being in control, let's do that. And that's the reason it worked. It was because of her input and her seizing the moment creatively to do that and actually work on her craft. When she came back, I think I told you, between the first album, Control, and Rhythm Nation, when she came back for Rhythm Nation, she had all these ideas and all these lyrics and all this stuff was like, she had done her homework. She was like ready to go. By the time we got to the Janet album, it was so easy because it was like she knew exactly what it was. And it was full, it was just trust. And she had carved her niche as her own person. And she had done it from the kind of black and white, Miss You Much, Rhythm Nation, all the way through to the also black and white, although there's a colored version of it also, Love Will Never Do. And that journey through that album was all about going from, to me, Janet's little sister to Janet.
Right.
So it was then memorialized, if you will, on that album, on the Janet album. But that process had already begun to take effect through her successful tour, all of her hits, and all of, and her visuals and all of those things. So that to me had already begun to happen. So I never felt like Janet was necessarily done out of frustration as much as just the want to be known as her own person. Just a step forward, a step out of the shadow, because the family's a huge shadow. Mm-hmm. But she loves her family, and it wasn't done out of in any sort of negative way. It was just a very positive thing for her to do for herself, and we were totally in agreement with it and thought it made all the sense in the world, even to the point of the first single, when we finally decided that That's the Way Love Goes was going to be the single. The original art on the CD didn't even have her name on it. It just said That's the Way Love Goes in red letters on the top. And I said, you don't even need to put your name on it. People will see the picture of you and read the title, and that's all they need to know. Mm-hmm. And I remember they did it, and then I remember the record company kind of fudged a little bit, and they did do a version that actually has her name on it. But if you have the original CD single of That's the Way Love Goes, yeah, that was well, I don't know if it was a good idea, but that was my idea. And I picked that picture, too. And I said, that's the picture, that's the way to do it. Don't even put your name on it, and just kind of, there it is, and it worked really well, so I'm happy.
Before I let you go, I did want to ask you about this because since you and I talked the last time, this event hadn't happened. So I wanted to bring up the Hollywood Bowl experience with her bringing back all those dancers. And obviously, everybody that is a true Janet fan lost their marbles seeing her do that. Did you know in advance, Jimmy, that was going to happen? I know you were at the show. And what was it like to be a part of it?
Yeah, I did know that was going to happen. And it was absolutely amazing. And I had a chance to say hi to a lot of the dancers beforehand. I saw Kelly and I saw just a bunch of them beforehand, and it was just so cool. It was amazing. And once again, when you think about just Janet and the way she is, there's a lot of different. I mean, listen, she could have thrown a party just for the dancers and everybody got together and reminisced and all of that, which actually happened. That did also happen. There was a get together with everybody, but that wouldn't have satisfied the fans. So to bring them back and have them be able to be a part of her show, once again, to me, is so generous of her to give them the spotlight and to recognize all the contributions that each one of those dancers have given to her in her musical growth and her visual growth and concert performances and all that. It was a magic moment. It was amazing. It just speaks to the kind of person that she is. And I was happy to be there for it. It was wow. I'm just thinking about it now. I mean, what a moment. The other thing that really struck me about it is when Janet talked about the idea of a rhythm nation, and she talked about the idea of music bringing everybody together, and it didn't matter your age, your genre, or your gender rather. It didn't matter. It was about people coming together, and so. You looked on that stage when all those dancers were up there, and it looked like the way, to me, a nation is supposed to look. Black, Asian, white, you name it. It was almost like every nation individually was a part of it, but then they were all in one place brought together by music. And that was her dream 30-some years ago. For that to happen. So to be there that night and see that manifest itself on stage was an amazing event. And you would hope that seeing that kind of togetherness being brought together by music would be a great commentary or a great lesson for certainly this country, but certainly the world, about the power that music has. And she's used it in such a positive way to bring people together. And we see it now when we see songs like New Agenda become part of the women's movement. When we see songs from the Rhythm Nation, unfortunately, the timeliness of living in a world they didn't make with, the commentary on what's happening with shootings in schools and all of those things. But it's about using the music as a communicator and a way to bring people together. Through, as she said, music and dance, and she's doing it. It's not like an empty, marketing thing or anything like that. And it's interesting that some of the most relevant words that are out there right now are words that she has written 25 years ago, 30 years ago, are just as relevant today as they were when they were originally done. So that's what I came away from it. I just looked at that stage and I just said, that's what Rhythm Nation looks like.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like when I was able to see some of the social media posts, like I got chills and was just, yeah, because especially I think if you've been like a long time fan of Janet, seeing all those groups of dancers together and the fact that she was responsible for bringing them all back together again. First of all, I don't think any other artist on the planet could have done that because no one else would have
Right.
cared. And also just, yeah, to see that she has such respect for the people that helped make her projects be successful, like to bring all those dancers back. So did you talk to her after the event and like how she felt about how it went down on stage? Like I can only imagine the emotions that she had, performing with all of these dancers that, as she, well-knownly calls them, her kids.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We did talk about it a little bit, but we had kind of talked about it before because I knew she was going to do it. But the thing you mentioned is very true. But the reason that not only nobody could really do it, but I think the other thing is that the fact that she put the dancers so much in the forefront so that people knew them. It wasn't like I'm the star and you guys are back there. She made it a point every night to bring them out and introduce them in the concert situations. They were always part of the videos. So that's the reason it was relevant over and above beyond bringing everybody back together is the fact that everybody knew who everybody was from the different eras of things that she had done because she made everybody relevant in the day, which then made them relevant today, when she brought them back. And that's, once again, it just talks about the kind of person that she is and how blessed we are to, have been able to work with her for so long and be a part of that.
And I just wanted to ask you last question about the album and the tour and the whole situation. Just what do you want to leave the fans with when you look back on 25 years of Janet, period?
I would love for people to just go back and listen to the album again. And I would love for everybody that remembers the album to turn somebody new on to the album and let them listen to it. Because I think I don't know, it felt really great for me to listen to it today because I don't I don't know what people think I do. I don't sit around and listen to Janet's records. Don't. But when I knew we were talking, I wanted to have things fresh in my mind, and that was the reason I did it. And it was an amazing experience to go back and listen to kind of the depth and certainly the breadth musically of where the album is. So I would encourage everybody to do that. And then I would just thank all the fans for keeping it alive and keeping it relevant. And after all these years, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And I think the album holds up really well. It actually, for me personally, it actually surprised me how much I actually enjoyed listening to it. I really enjoyed, the experience of it. So that's it. And once again, Kelly, I always thank you for being a fan and just supporting what we do because we don't do it in a vacuum. We don't do it alone. We do it, and it takes everybody to kind of come together and make something relevant. And so we thank you for that. And I know the fans thank you for that too and appreciate everything that you do. So, but that's it for me.
Okay, perfect. Well, I love you so much and thank you again for spending time with us. And I'm going to tell you to do what you did the last time, which is remind Janet. I think you're good at reminding Janet to not forget that she's got a pretty important anniversary coming up with the 25th anniversary. So congratulations to you and Terry and Janet, because again, just a phenomenal album.
Thank you, Kelly.
That's Grammy Award-winning producer Jimmy Jam. Make sure to follow him on Instagram and Twitter at Flight Time Jam. Hey, it's Kelly. Thank you so much for hanging out and watching and listening to our interviews. We always appreciate your time. Please make sure to follow us on our YouTube channel and also hit up our website so that you can subscribe to our newsletter so you are always up to date with everything that we have got going on with the show. KellyAlexanderShow.com/subscribe.